My name is Maggie Lindruth, and I am the U.S. Director of the American Center for Mongolian Studies, or ACMS. ACMS is a private, independent, nonprofit organization that's based in both the USA and in Mongolia, actually in the same building as where we are right now, just around the corner. We support the development of Mongolian studies and academic and cultural exchanges within the broader Mongolian or Mongol region. And we offer a number of programs and services to do this, including our language program at all levels of Mongolian, online and in person, a research library with one of the largest collections of English language Mongolian studies books in UB and other materials, as well as books and materials in other languages, including Mongolian, Chinese, Russian, and others. We also offer research support services to foreign and Mongolian scholars, experiential summer programs, and other services as well. To learn more about our programs, to become a member, or to support us through a donation, you can visit our website by scanning this QR code right now or after the presentation. And now I want to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Natasha Fijn. Dr. Fijn is a leading scholar in multispecies ethnography and sensory anthropology based at the Australian National University, where she is the director of the Mongolia Institute. Her interdisciplinary research bridges environmental humanities, animal studies, and anthropology, focusing on domestication, ethno-veterinary care, and more than human sociality. Her seminal work, Living with Herds, Human-Animal Coexistence in Mongolia, offers an in-depth ethnographic account of multi-species mobile pastoralism. Currently, she leads an Australian Research Council Future Fellowship project titled A Multi-Species Anthropological Approach to Influenza, which examines zoonotic disease dynamics among Mongolian herding communities on the boundary of conservation reserves. Fijn integrates photography and observational filmmaking into her research methodology, which produces documentaries such as 2 Seasons Multi-Species Medicine in Mongolia. So in her talk today, Dr. Fijn will share findings from her ethnographic field research on the practice of bloodletting in horses, which is one of the key modes of treatment that herders employ for more serious illnesses found in horses in Mongolia, particularly for equine influenza and other respiratory problems. So first, before I turn things over to Dr. Fijn for her presentation, I want to thank the American Corner for hosting us today. The American Corner is a U.S. Embassy-sponsored space right here, where we are at this moment in UB, that holds a variety of cultural and educational programs focused on American culture and English language, and they've also long been an important strategic partner for us at the ACMS, and we're really grateful to them for their willingness to host this event today, so thank you to them. And thank you all for joining us on your Friday evening. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Natasha Fijn.
So today I'm going to speak about bloodletting, an ancient nomadic practice for contemporary diseases. And just slight warning is I'm going to show some video footage and it's got puncturing, but it's not very close. It's from, it's not too bad. I didn't get squeamish at all when I was filming it, so it's okay. So in the countryside where people still live amongst herd animals, medicinal techniques are practiced across the species divide. What is interesting about Mongolia is a different kind of pluralistic medical philosophy, where the perceived division between human and other forms of mammalian illness are less pronounced. Within the herding community, if a family member is injured or a lame horse requires treatment, then bloodletting is applied. Within the first part of this presentation, I'll focus on how herders cope with respiratory problems in horses, then provide details on primary ethno-veterinary research on bloodletting on horses. The nomadic pastoral approach to health and illness is part of a suite of daily herding practices in the care, nurturing, and movement of animals oriented toward the prevention of illness. When asked about infectious diseases such as equine influenza, herders often comment that Mongolian horses tend to avoid being struck down by serious diseases in comparison to smaller mammals, such as sheep and goats. Mongolian horses seem less susceptible to the wide range of zoonotic diseases, such as brucellosis, foot and mouth, and anthrax. Larger horses and cattle to a degree seek out pasture further from the encampment and are less likely to consume their own feces and urine while grazing compared to the smaller herd animals that stay near the encampment. To keep a horse healthy, herders moved to fresh pasture to locate new grass and minerals that can be found near lakes and rivers. Herders emphasise that horses know best and that their main form of treatment is from nature or bagel. Horses self-medicate on medicinal plants that grow wild as diverse species found on the grassland, particularly in mountainous areas and on the aromatic desert steppe. It is usually only when horses become overworked and stressed from horse racing or hard riding then it is thought to result in a horse becoming sick. Racehorses are much more prone to injury and problems with the cardiovascular system, such as catching pneumonia. So respiratory problems, and I'm giving equine influenza as a kind of case study. Herders do not tend to make a great deal of distinction between a cold, or aduni hainad, and equine influenza, aduni hainad tomu, one being bigger in intensity than the other, while with influenza the horse is more likely to have a fever. Both horses and camels get colds that can become chronic due to improper care, nutrition and maintenance of an individual animal. Aduni hainad can apply to both infectious and non-infectious conditions. Herders recognise that the main time of transmission of equine influenza from one horse to another is during the horse racing season, when horses gather from all over the country. A race trainer and horse herder that has been trained by a famous horse trainer in the Gobi Desert, Nergui, indicated that he was aware that horses can spread the flu through fluid from their nostrils, spreading the infection to other horses drinking from water troughs. In the area near Bogatsum, where he now lives, the horses drink from flowing streams, so he thought that influenza was less of a problem than in eastern provinces. The perception is that flu can spread via wind too, and it can travel in the air through aerosol transmission through the form of a cough or a sneeze. And that's in both humans and horses. Herders indicated that the symptoms of equine influenza are the following. The afflicted individual becomes hollow with cramping in the stomach, ceases to graze with a loss of appetite, has green discharge from a running nose and starts to cough. One go-to method when a horse has early symptoms of cold or influenza is that the mouth becomes swollen. So herders bloodlet on the roof of the mouth, or the tagnai point, and that's the herders puncturing the roof of the mouth here. A herder on the boundary of Husto Nuru National Park said instead of a knife he uses the tip of a white gazelle horn, presumably as a wild animal has power in the medicinal sense. If the horse is not improving, the herder may later pull on the tongue to jab at the junction of the two vessels at the base of the tongue, or at the aorta that runs along either side of the underside of the base of the tail. So in the treatment of flu in horses, herders often resort to antibiotics that are from China, which may be unregulated or falsely labelled. As a means of fortifying racehorses against illness, horse trainers now purchase vitamins and minerals to build up the horse's immunity. When I spoke to a vet responsible for the herding community surrounding a small local township, he said with cases of equine influenza he would recommend antibiotics, although antibiotics would be ineffective unless it has progressed to pneumonia or a bacterial infection. At a particularly large provincial Naadam in Altai, with over 500 horses competing in the over 5-year-old or Ichnas category race alone, the racetrack was sanitised before the Naadam. All vehicles entering or exiting the area prior to the Naadam were stopped on the road and sanitised, as were the legs of all horses being transported in the vehicles. But this is dependent on local government measures, so either at the provincial or the SUM level. Vaccinations are distributed from the state to local veterinarians if an outbreak is occurring rather than as a preventative measure, due to the expense of administering a vaccination through such a large horse population across such an expansive land area that encompasses Mongolia. Horses are highly mobile, through stallions being sold across different provinces, and horses travel large distances in trucks and then congregate to attend Naadam festivals, which means the disease mainly spreads through contact between horses during the horse racing season and in the summer. Herders use different traditional treatments for horses with influenza across different regions. In Balgan, Hovskol, and the Gobi Altai, individual herders indicated that they use dried horse dung, while some mix the dung with animal fat and burn it on the windward side so the horse breathes in the mixture. If the dried dung comes from Tach, or the Przewalski horse, it is believed to be more powerful than from a Mongolian horse. In the area of Hustai Noru National Park, herders burn the marrow from cattle bones, while another remedy is to mix gunpowder with water. A horse trainer attending the Altai Naadam said when horses had equine influenza in spring, he would burn cattle bones and gave them a boost with modern vitamins and garlic oil. In Bulgan province, if human or horse has a fever, herders use dried mushroom, particularly a kind of tree fungus or harmodnimog. The tree fungus is hard to find, as herders indicated that injured deer browse on it for medicinal purposes. So the tree mushroom is above the browsing height of a deer and can only be collected while on horseback. One piece is then dried and retained for use in small doses over a number of years. Some organs of wild animals are used for treating influenza in horses, such as squirrel meat, as squirrels consume medicinal tree-related products. The knowledgeable herder Megmajav indicated he uses the dried head of the yellow flower, the tundra rose, giving it to the horse as tea 3 times a day. In the sand dunes and desert steppe of Homental in Zavkhan province, a herder mentioned that he uses a combination of salt marsh with boiled water, the yellow-flowered Tavgan sher, and licorice grass or chikarovs when his family caught the flu, while he would drive the herd near the salt marshes where these medicinal plants grow, and then the horses would medicate themselves as they graze. So now I'll turn to bloodletting as the second part of the presentation, and this is to follow as a narrative description or a vignette. In April 2017, we stopped on our way to my field location in Arhangai to visit a herding family on the way, as often occurs when on a journey anywhere in the countryside. I'm used to research in the mountain steppe region of the Hungai Mountains. Instead, here were large sand dunes making for an unusual backdrop in the distance. There was hardly any grass for the herds to graze on in spring, with just a few unpalatable-looking scraggly shrubs. A knowledgeable herder, Gulsandoj, was called via mobile phone to come to the encampment to assist with some bloodletting and tooth extraction. This instance has become a particularly vivid sensory experience in my mind. After having a welcoming salty milk tea in a ger and then making our way back outside, a herder seemingly appeared on the horizon out of nowhere and unceremoniously stepped off his horse. Prior to bloodletting, Gulsandoj sat in the lee of a strong wind to the west side of the yurt to sharpen his bloodletting knife with a grindstone. While sharpening, he described 4 different kinds of bloodletting knife, while he kept the knife he was sharpening in his hand for the specific purpose of bloodletting. In this instance, he planned to puncture blood vessel points on the lower inner foreleg, or burt, and at the back of the heel, gahai. Knowledgeable herders can quickly diagnose when there are any health problems within a herd. So Gulsandoj observed that a young beige-coloured horse was already losing its winter coat and stumbling a few times as it moved across the stony ground. He could see that releasing blood from key blood vessels in the legs would rejuvenate the young gelding by regenerating the blood. He pointed out the beige horse when one of the teenagers looped the lasso over the gelding's neck. The beige horse was wise and did not put up any resistance, immediately coming to a halt, possibly feeling too weak to resist after having just endured a long, hard Mongolian winter with little food. It is remarkable that horses manage to subsist on such a sparsely vegetated landscape, but Mongolian horses are exceptionally hardy. Gelsendorf observed that the horse had what he called sherdien, a condition where the horse molts and loses its coat too early. He added that it is from the horse eating the wrong kind of pasture resulting in bad blood, or an accumulation of blood in the legs from toxins in the vegetation. He likened the horse stumbling and tripping to a person's hand becoming numb or going to sleep because the blood was not circulating around the body and no longer reaching the lower extremities. He explained that he lets blood from the heel so that the horse will no longer stumble as it walks. Gelsendorf focused on letting blood out from the inner side of the lower forelegs, as blood had accumulated there. He held the knife out for the exact pressure point, then punctured the skin with a quick jab, the horse jumping in response. Gelsendorf explained that the flow of blood around the horse's body had become irregular. So to counter this, the herder massaged up the horse's forelegs to push blood up from the hooves, encouraging the blood to flow out of the body. Herding families are careful not to spill any blood out of respect for the animal, usually like when slaughtering an animal, because both blood and bones are considered sacred. In this case, however, it is acceptable to allow blood to be released and to spill freely onto the ground in order to spill the bad blood out of the body. So once the blood was flowing better and less viscous, the young beige horse was released. He shook himself and walked slowly over to the corral to be with the rest of the herd. So the herder's intention is to assist in the individual horse's health and to prevent future illness. The procedure is not meant as a means of forceful submission and subservience from the horse. To my surprise, beige gelding did not even attempt to move away from the humans who had caused him pain just a few seconds prior. Evidently, he was aware that his ordeal was now over. Once Gelsendorf had finished his tasks, he stepped lightly up onto his horse, turned without a word, and cantered back into the surrounding desert steppe in the opposite direction from whence he had come.
Сайхан орж байна. Яах гэж барьж байгаа юм. Сул атрын хийгээ тавьчих. Нэг нь гаднаа байгаа юм чи. Нэг. Анаатга зүгөө орчих. Энэ гатхуурын гоцгоо. Дөрвөн төрөл байдгийг. За. Сэмхий гатгадаг гутг гэж нэг өөр. Хөөсөн хаа гатгадаг гутг гэж нэг өөр. Өсхий гатгадаг гутг гэж нэг өөр. За бус цудсных нэг өөр ингээд дөрвөн төрөл байдгийг. Уус нь бол яг намынхан дагуу. Их ирж байгаа гэдэг. Хачаа хүнээс нуугаад юу хэлэхгүй байна. Олон жил апаа хэрэгсэн надад яриа илүү байгаа да. Та нарыг яаж үйг үүсгэв. За холмороо тэр төмөрний урд талд авчиж жагаад чөдөрлөд царч. Цогтогдоод. Цогтоо. Ширхтэн гэдэг чи одоо энэ өсөн унаад ингээд зулгачаад байгаа. Тэр нөгөө мууц ус идээд тижэл мэжэл идснээс болж мууц ус идээд тэгээ ингээд одоо энэ өсөн ингэж өөрөө унахаас өмнө ингэж халцарч байгааг ширхтэх гэж ярьж байгаа юм. За нэгт хоёрт тэгээд энэ хөлөнд цус бууж байгаа юм. Бууцсан байгаа энэ. Энэ хоёр хөлөнд. Тийм учраас энэ хөлний цусыг одоо ингээд авна. Энэ хөлдөө жоосон байна. Тэмтэрж байгаа л. Ясаа их төлөвлөдөг. Нүчрээд байгаа юм. Энэ яагаад хүндүр суусан бэ гэхээр энэ нөгөө хүндүр суусны яагаад ингэж энийг гатах гэж байгаа юм бэ гэхээр дутуу гიშгээд бүдчээд ийдээ. Тийм учраас энэний хүндүрийг эндээс нь авдаг байхгүй юу? Энэ ард одоо энэ өдмөр гэж ярина, өсхийш гэж ярьдаг энэ гахаа гэж ярьж байгаа юм. Одоо гахааг энэ эдлэгийн өстэй янзыг гатсан. Ингээ хий орж байгаа тэр доотлоор. Тэгээ тэр хийгээр энэ тавгных нөгөө хөндүүр нь гарчиж байгаа юм. За одоо цорвыг авчих юм. Энэ муу цус ийм хөрөө гарна. Энэ одоо ингээд ухаан ягаан болно. Ухаан ягаан болоод ирэхээр жинхэнэ нөгөө цэвэр цус нь цэвэр болж байгаа гэсэн үг. Энийг одоо нөгөө ухаан ягаан болтол ингэж гойж болно. Маа энийг болоо. За тэгээ энийг ч одоо ингээд доороос нь хөөн бас цусыг. Одоо жоохон шингэрч ирж байна. Болоогүй энэ амар цустай. Нөгөө хөөсөн хаа гэдэг чинь энд байдгийг. Хөөсөн хаа гэдэг чинь чэйжин талд гэмтэл авсан. Адуу гатгаж байгаа юм.
Яахаар чэйжин шат гэмтлэх вэ?
Яг нөгөө хүн түн унаад энэ төр чэйж мэж ингээд бэлцгэнчдэг. Тэгэхээр одоо энэ хөөсөн хаа гэдэг нь энэ далны завсраар. Одоо цэг нь бол энэ хавьд ингэж байж байгаа юм. Энэ завсраар ингээд нэг өдий дайны ордож хөөсөн хааныхаа нөгөө өвчнийг гаргаж авдаг. Ингээд
ийм урт утга яадаг гэсэн үг.
Тэгэлгүй яхаа нарийнхан ийм хөөсөн хаагахддаг тийм тусгай тийм утга байдаг. Тэгээд тэргээр хатдаг. Одоо энэ муу цус гарсан байхад энэний өсмөс төв зүгээр болно гэсэн үг. Ерөөсөө. Энэ хөлн сайжирна тэгээд энэ өсмөс нь нөгөө ширхэн энэ төр нь одоо зүгээр болно гэсэн үг байхгүй.
За ингээ холбор саран хөлтөө боллоо бай.
Сарын дараа зүгээр жил бомцсон юм шиг л байна. Тэгээ бүр аргагүй үед бол яг нэг 15 хоногт бол эдэлж болно. Ер нь сар болгоо сайн.
Сайн тийм.
За сар л болчвол тэгээд ерөөсөө бүрэн эдлэгэл хийж болно гэсэн үг.
Одоо тэгээд ерөөсөө барихгүй гэсэн үг.
Барихгүй унахгүй нэг сар болгочвол тэгээд ерөөсөө эн чинь бүр хачи янзын таргалаад бүх нөгөө өөрийнхөө одоо ямар төрдөг үлээ яг тэр хэвийн байдалтай орно гэсэн үг. Цусны эргэлт мэргэлтэн сайжраад өнгө цусан засаад урд нь таргална. Ийм үед бол адуу ямар ч тэжээгээд ямар ч ногоо идэ таргалдаггүй. Нөгөө муу цусан төрцөөдгүй ерөөсөө таргална гэж байдаг. Тийм учраас энэ муу цус чинь олон төрөл сайл да. Муу цусыг ингэж авч яах юм да.
So now I'll go into more of the details about bloodletting on horses more generally. One of the few places where bloodletting across species still occurs is Mongolia. The practice is particularly carried out on horses to prepare them for the stamina required during the rigours of Naadam. Treatment through letting blood is used to cool the system when it is too hot, via a selection of specific points that tap into blood vessels beneath the skin. This means that bloodletting is suitable for the treatment of febrile diseases with an elevation in body temperature, headaches, joint disorders and cold damage, or zoonotic diseases such as tuberculosis and leprosy. In the early 1990s, not long after Mongolia transitioned to a democracy, Mongolian scientist Sugaraksa interviewed many renowned and award-winning herders. After the diagnosis of an individual, he emphasized how important it is to, and I quote, determine the location of the blood vessels, the depths to jab, the amount of blood to be released, taking into account the type of livestock, age, gender, size, whether they're small or large, fatness, the alternation of bloodletting of several vessels in order, and the equalization of the blood. So there are many factors that need to be taken into consideration when bloodletting. Bloodletting is often applied to racehorses, not when they have a serious illness, but when they are weak in spring after a long, harsh winter, and so you just saw that with the beige horse. The letting of blood can be used to assist the horse to gain strength and endurance for the forthcoming racing season to help a horse fatten over the summer months, or is employed as a way of releasing toxins that are built up in the body, such as from toxic plants or infections. Bloodletting tools between human and horse differ. The tools used on horses are often handmade and look more like a simple blade encased in wood of varying lengths depending upon the condition. Bloodletting tools used in humans are finer, possibly because the horse's skin is thicker than human skin. Objects such as knives are perceived as sacred, often passed down from father to son within families. So healers come from hereditary medical lineages. A bloodletting practitioner, such as Dogsum here, has generally learnt the techniques from a parent or elder within the community. As male herders slaughter herd animals and dismember the parts, they build up knowledge about the underlying physiology and functioning of an animal's body, which can then be applied to humans too. Bloodletting is traditionally only performed by males. According to the knowledgeable herder Dogsum, who is in his 70s, the two main traditional ways he medically treats herd animals is through bloodletting and with medicinal herbs, and I've found this is quite common. He has two different kinds of bloodletting tool he uses on horses. And I'll just show you a short clip of Dogsum.
Одоо ингээд хэдэн төрөл байна? Хоёр төрөл байна. Энэ үл яг ба энэ хавар мавар нэг эмзэг цагаар бас их цус гаргахгүй тул. Одоо дээрээ бол ууралгаар боллоо гэж хэлсэн. Тэгээд нэг тагнаа магнаа янз бүрийн тааруус удснаас уур гарцал болно, хэд тусцал болно.
Dogsum makes it clear that bloodletting is conducted only at appropriate times of the year and under the right weather conditions. The treatment is sensitive to surrounding environmental factors and ideally should only be performed on clear, stable and auspicious days according to the Buddhist calendar, and also without clouds and too much sun. As another herding elder described, horses do not undergo bloodletting after nardam, or after they have gained weight from fresh grass, so midsummer in July would not be a bloodletting time. For specific illnesses, horses may be pierced in spring or occasionally in winter. In spring, a herder will minimise the amount of blood that is let out, whereas more can be expelled when the horse is fatter. As a retired vet pointed out in Chengiz City while we were researching there just last week, it is like when taking a drink from the tap, and I quote, so you let the tap run for a while to then drink the fresh water that comes out afterwards. So in other words, it's not good for the body to have thick blood running through the body over and over again, and bloodletting is a way of regenerating the blood and thinning it. So other factors that herders take into account are not to bloodlet if the horse has a fever, when horses are too young or pregnant, if the individual has just been worked or ridden hard, or if the individual is too full, or the opposite, overly hungry. So it's very specific conditions that they'll choose to bloodlet on a horse. Bloodletting may be employed in conjunction with other techniques which are attributed to the opposites of hot and cold temperatures. One example is if horses are having trouble with blood circulating around their legs, herders take horses down to the river and let them stand in the cold flowing water. So Gulsendorf, who featured in the video segment earlier, pointed out a particularly dangerous bloodletting point, or husanha, which is for injuries to the upper body, often from a rider being too heavy for the horse's back, resulting in swelling and internal injury. Puncturing at this point is also helpful with digestive issues, such as if a horse has been poisoned by a plant, such as wild leek. Finding the correct pressure point requires a lot of experience and knowledge of the horse's physiology on the herder's part, as it requires inserting a long, narrow blade to the depth of 4 fingers in width, and the depth is also dependent upon the size of the horse's chest. So if the blade is pushed in at the wrong place, it could potentially puncture the heart, killing the horse. So now I'll just describe one particular bloodletting point on the roof of the mouth, or the tagnai point. The blood vessel between the third ridge and the hard palate on the roof of the mouth is a pressure point that is well known and readily used by herders, which can be used for a variety of symptoms. So the hard palate is detailed here since it's used for respiratory problems such as a cold that could have developed into pneumonia or a cough from Jilbin, which is another kind of condition based on herders riding a horse too hard or at the wrong time of year. So it's also used if the horse is having trouble eating or overexertion leading to a thumping heart, an unusual heartbeat, plant poisoning, gas in the colon from hunger, inflammation of the mouth or pharynx, or nasal worms. So when bloodletting is a mode of treatment, it's also often complemented by the use of medicinal plants. If the horse does not improve, then depending on the condition, the release of blood will go to other key points on the horse's body. In the spring of 2017, Ulaanbaatar, an energetic herder in his early 40s, let blood from a horse in their herd and 2 of the neighbouring herders' 2-year-old horses to assist them to become stronger for the upcoming Naadam racing season. With a knife that has been passed down over the generations, he wrapped it to make sure the blade entered the body to the correct depth. If the knife is jabbed in too deeply, it can cause swelling. It is also important that the puncture is made vertically, so like that rather than horizontally, so that the blade does not cut through a major blood vessel. And I'll just play a short clip of Ulaanbaatar bloodletting.
Цус нь одоо ингэж өөрөө тогтчихгүй дээ. Тогтно. Муу цуснд дуусгараа тогтчих гэсэн үг.
So Ulaanbaatar made a quick jab into the roof of the young 2-year-old horse's palate and between the 3rd and 4th ridge of the roof of the mouth, while his nephew watched on as a way of learning the technique over time. The blood pooling on the ground stopped dripping from the mouth within 5 minutes. The individual horses were subsequently fed dried nutritious plants with vitamins, including nettle, to help them to gain strength. In 15 days, the bloodletting on the palate is repeated. So herders often assess the expelled blood based on colour and viscosity. They are familiar with the physiology of the herd animals and what a healthy animal's blood looks like. If the blood is dark and viscous in colour, rather than pink and free-flowing, then it's considered bad blood. The blood itself becomes an active agent with good and bad attributes, free-flowing versus slow and viscous, or healthy pink in comparison to a dark, almost black colour. The letting of the blood should cease once the blood becomes pinkish red or when the animal begins to sweat. Bleeding can be stopped by pressing on the point with burnt cloth or a hot stone, while bleeding from the limbs usually stops after a horse has walked around for 15 to 20 minutes. So, to conclude, horses in Mongolia are hardy and, according to herders, do not need much medical attention in comparison to the smaller herd animals. Horses tend to look after themselves by self-medicating on medicinal plants that they seek out while grazing. It is only when they have been overworked and ridden hard by humans that problems then occur. There are rising problems with zoonotic diseases, one of which is equine influenza. But this is not distinguished greatly from a bad cold, as the treatment is similar, often in the form of bloodletting. A celebrated horse trainer indicated he now mainly uses biomedicines, but in the case of influenza, where antibiotics are not effective, he still uses the traditional method of bloodletting. And bloodletting is a part of an embodied sensory engagement between herder and horse. The herder feels for the correct point on the horse's body with his fingers before using a knife to jab at the horse's body, and then helps the blood to flow better by applying massage. Or if it's flowing too freely, he might actively block the flow of blood with his hand or a cloth. Bloodletting is an example of a herder's approach to medicinal treatment more generally, where prevention is seen as better than curative measures further down the track. If a herder observes that a horse's coat looks dull, or the horse is not molting at the right time of year, then the herder will let blood out to kickstart the horse's immune system response. The horse is then observed to become more energetic, healthier, and fatter. I was going to say fattier, fatter. And I'd just like to say this is part of an Australian Research Council grant, and to thank Ed and Ulaanbaatar, who's sitting here, and Mijidoj Ulaanbaatar and Mungtamar for their assistance with fieldwork, and thank you to the herding families who participated in the research and their kind hospitality. Thank you. So, questions?
I wonder if they are all stallions. I mean, the gender of the horses. It seems like horses are really important in the Mongolian life, and I am a gender historian, so I really care about the gender roles. I'm not using wrong terminology, but I do wondering like is there any like fillies, like the young female horse or mares? So one of my friends was joking at me is like, you're interested in Mongolian study as well as gender study, you should deal with like the after birth care of a bear. So I really wonder their genders.
Yeah, well, the horses in the horse care is more male oriented, you know, and women usually more milking the cattle and sheep and goats, but the bloodletting is specifically male, and because it's sort of like a sacred ongoing tradition. So I don't know of any females that do the bloodletting. But in terms of the animals itself, that is an interesting kind of aspect, and any horse can be bloodlet, but not really young animals. So they have to be resilient, and so it is more male horses, and probably more males are race horses, and so like stallion or geldings. But yeah, some mares are raced, and if a mare is injured or something or stumbling, then they will bloodlet on the mare. But actually, there's a researcher from she's Swedish, Andrea Petit, and she's done interesting work on sort of gendered relations between cowboys in Colorado, horses and cattle, and really examined the gendered nature of it all. Because yeah, the male animals are often segregated out from the female animals, and that's the case here. You know, for the milking purposes, it's the mares with their young, and then the geldings are off in another herd. So yeah, and it's only the one stallion. So it is interesting how gendered the animals are too in terms of the groupings. But what's interesting in Mongolia is it's more natural groupings rather than forced groupings, like say in Australia or New Zealand, the gendered sort of structure of the herds is much more human manipulated. But yeah, here in Mongolia it's more a natural kind of scenario, because with the the Przewalski horse, they have like the herd with the stallion and the mares and their young, but then a separate kind of bachelor herd, which is sort of like similar to the geldings as a separate herd. So it's sort of replicating what you would find in nature. Yeah.
How common is the practice of bloodletting among, I know there was one example of the nephew learning from his uncle, I guess, with younger, kids, kind of teens who are trying to kind of learn. When would one start learning these practices, and then how kind of widespread still, I suppose, is it for younger generations?
Yeah, so it's not a sort of specific kind of, okay, teaching you now kind of thing. It's a practical trial and error process over time. And so I guess if a younger teenager was really interested in it, then just observe, and then the father may allow but usually it's sort of once the person's an adult, not young. Yes, bloodletting's for more adult males, yeah. And usually after they've been horse trainers for a while and really know the horse, everything about the horses very well. Because, the bloodletting can kill the horse if it's not done correctly. So it does take a lot of knowledge and practice over time. And the trouble is it's a declining practice. Like some areas, there's not many herders that actually know it anymore. And so, and because things get replaced with biomedicines and actually in Europe and America, there used to be bloodletting on humans and horses, but in terms of horses, it's sort of been overtaken by antibiotics and penicillin, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't work. It's just been superseded by other kind of methods. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for that very interesting lecture. And as long as the Western medicine, the medicine is that has been using widely, which one, is the bloodletting or the medicine? Which method that has prefer to use on horses and things like?
Often it's used in combination, so it's sort of a pluralistic method where anything that works will be used. So it's not like, oh, I'm only using traditional methods here and I'm only using more biomedicines here. It's sort of combined, and if the person has the knowledge of the bloodletting still, then they'll readily use it. But the thing is that often the traditional methods have less side effects, and that doesn't influence the meat to later eat it and things like that. So but it's dependent on the individual herder really, like what their strategy is for treating that animal. And also differs depending on the region as well, whether it's the desert or the mountainous area or the grassland steppe. Yeah. No, it's more the knowledge of the herder and whether intergenerationally that knowledge has been passed on, or whether there's elders, because Dogsum, he would go round to a lot of other herders and because he's so knowledgeable about it, and then do the bloodletting with the different herders, and then so if other people watch him doing it, then they might then apply that themselves if he does it a number of times, or he might sort of show them how to do it if they're really interested. So, yeah.
Thank you again all for coming, and let's just give Natasha Fijn one more round of applause. So thank you.
And thanks very much for coming.